Welcome to the Language Channel, a mental health channel for men, the world. We're here with Coach Lamborn, John Lamborn, coached with me 20 years ago over at Bingham High School. Today's episode is The Game is Changing, an attack on men's roles and levels of influence. And Coach, happy to have you here with us.
Thanks, appreciate it.
No, definitely. I know I've always been able to drop in over at Bingham and can even come unannounced, and I always feel like you give me some time.
Yeah, of course.
It makes me feel special, like good times,
No big
good
deal.
times. Coach, you just got back from a trip, huh? Spent time with family?
Did. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, where'd you go again?
Just up to, or out to Moab,
Yeah?
3 or 4 days. Had the little ones with us, it was fun.
So how big's the family now, Coach?
Well, that group, the family's 13, 14 people. That was 9 of us.
All right, all right.
And, let me think, 9, including 2 grandchildren.
Well, Coach, you got this family. When I hit you up about today's episode, you told me that, you love time with your family. That really stuck out to me. And then it made me think of all the time that you've spent with the football family and as a coach. And when I was over at Bingham, I'd say I graduated 05, so 03 and 04 football seasons. I know you and Coach Dave Peck took turns being head coaches throughout your career, but at that time you were running the offense.
Right.
And I'd go against you in practice a little bit, but I was on the defense.
Yeah.
And Coach, what a journey. Give me an idea of like your coaching resume. Like you've been coaching, when did you stop coaching? When did you start coaching? How many seasons you coach? Give or take.
All right, well, I coached a total of 36 football seasons
36 football seasons.
in high school. Fiddled around with some of the youth leagues just prior to that for fun. I started coaching basketball 4 years prior to that, so 40 years of high school coaching.
Whew.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, huh, Coach?
Yeah, it was a lot.
And you've been a teacher in health, correct?
Health, driver's ed, sports medicine.
That's right. That was the class I took
That
from
was
you.
the class that you took,
Yep.
and a little bit of physical education.
Coach, how many region titles, how many championships?
Oh, I can't count the region titles.
Whew.
Not sure how many of those. We are pretty fortunate at both Hunter and Bingham to win region titles the majority of the years, or share region titles. And ultimately, I think that those region titles are a better indicator of consistent success than the state titles.
Is that right?
I think you have to be consistent to win the region titles. But then we did win 7 state titles and felt fortunate to have that opportunity.
And those were all at Bingham?
Yeah.
So you got 7 rings, Coach.
Yeah, I had a state championship in girls basketball at Taylorsville High School.
Okay.
So that was a fun, real rewarding experience too.
Wow, Coach. So what got you into coaching? You used to be a player, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I think more than anything else that coaching and teaching kind of parallel being a player or an athlete and a student. And I kind of like that vibe. And so I just, I don't know how much thought I really put into it. It just seemed like the natural way to go. And so that's how I ended up there.
Wow, Coach. And you stopped coaching for about how much time now? I know you're on you're close to possibly putting an end to the teaching a bit.
Yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah, I'm going to retire in a couple of months, but I've been out of coaching now for 4 seasons.
And focusing on things like family.
Yeah, it's amazing how busy you can stay in spite of giving up parts of things that you used to do.
Well, Coach, all the time that you put into us, our team, back when I look back, I coached a couple years over at West Jordan. I think we played y'all when you were still over there.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time. It's a lot of time commitment. So when you said you were with family, I really did compare that to the amount of time you gave me, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet. It became more and more difficult as my children got older and had their own things to be involved with. But I was real fortunate in the way things turned out that I didn't miss hardly any of the things that they did athletically, various performances and so forth. The one thing that I thought was good about high school football specifically came from a comment that my son made, and that was, "Dad, at least you came home every night." You compare that to someone who has to travel for business or collegiate coaching when they're out recruiting a lot, those kind of things. So at least he acknowledged that I came home every night, and I thought that was a good thing.
Oh, definitely. Coach, I have a son and a daughter, and just imagining, things with my son, whether he plays sports or not.
Yeah.
It's kids are a beautiful treasure.
Yeah.
And I think I heard something with LeBron James recently with something he did on air, and he was talking about the sacrifices he's had to make.
Yeah.
And I've never really heard him say things I'm like, wow, but it did stick out that, come home, he has to do this, he has to do that, and everyone in his family, understand the sacrifices. And I was just like, talk about just committed,
Yeah.
But I do believe you made those, and you did leave an impression on me as a young man, Coach. There was some things that were specific that happened, and you were not technically my coach. I mean, I loved hearing you say again, again, when it came to running 46 blast or what it was, and because I wanted to play scout defense just to keep the offense on their toes.
Right, I remember that.
But Coach, there was some times that you did try to give me some guidance, and looking back, I did not understand. And there was something that stuck out recently when we did chop it up over at the school for a bit when I gave you this invitation. You were talking to me about the societal pressure to kind of like influence like the way you can be a mentor, like the level of like volume, almost like the highest volume being like a big brother, someone who I took it would be like be hard with somebody and tell them exactly how it is, not sugarcoating it at all. Maybe more like an uncle, someone who seems like you did say maybe that era was a little bit of that, not quite the big brother. And more of a grandpa approach where it'd be like more sugarcoating it and being nice and just supportive and glad you tried. And what's that been like for you just in your career where maybe you felt like you couldn't quite turn it up?
Yeah, I don't remember that conversation specifically, but I have these concepts in mind. And part of that had to do with my evolution just because I got older relative to the guys that I was coaching. I don't know that I ever really consciously thought, well, I'm going to go and be, this influence on these kids. I always thought I'm just going to be who I am, and hopefully that's a good example. Now, mind you, I'm sure there were times when I wasn't a very good example and I didn't have the right perspective.
Well, you're human, and people make mistakes, and the fact that you'd even put yourself out there to be criticized, scrutinized, and trying to help, I think a lot of people get discouraged by that.
Yeah. You hope you do more good than harm. But, relationships are that way. They're not going to be perfect, but they need to be, I think, authentic. They need to be true to who you are.
Yeah.
But at times we have to not necessarily change who we are, but improve who we are also. And that comes with acknowledging, what you're doing and the impact you might be having on others. When you start having your own, it changes things quite a bit because you feel that specific responsibility. And I think for me, that was part of that growth to where now you guys became like my own anyway. Where before it would have been more the big brother thing because that's what I knew.
Okay.
And then I became a parent, and that kind of, it expands your perspective on what your role can be.
Right.
And uncle comes into play, and then the whole grandpa thing is where I think I ended my career. And that was more or less, I know I have to prepare players for the war that football is. And I know that I have to prepare my own grandson in the same manner. But at the same time, you can take that grandfather role and kind of expand on that and apply that in a different situation. And so up in the stands, when football practice was over, I could play that role, and that became really an enjoyable thing, and the kids joked and laughed about it. But I kind of took it as a compliment, just as I would have previously with being the big grandpa, or the big brother or what have you.
Right.
But rest assured that I don't have a problem with telling my grandson what the truth is. And, but I don't have to call him a little devil child either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's that balance, right, of influencing of what people have done. I look at it more like this, Coach. I think for mental health and being healthy, if somebody says they want to play the guitar, they want to be a
Yeah.
teacher, you want to be a football player. We can see who has been successful there. And I
Yeah.
think if you do more of what people have done to get there, you're on track.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do it a different way, I'll never want to be like, you'll never make it. But I'd be
Right.
like, you might be the first to win a championship doing that. You
Right.
might be the first to go to college, not playing high school, not lifting this way.
Yeah.
I mean, but it doesn't mean you can't do it.
Right.
But I would feel better if they did more of what has worked. And I think sometimes that reminder is hard for people to take in, but it's necessary, to get realigned. There's something called the 3 W's, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I? What am I? And I had to get creative, and I used a W on the 3 letters in on how am I? And I said,
Right.
if who you are is a hard worker, what you do better be hardworking. And if you don't, if they're not aligned, it affects how you feel.
Right.
And I've noticed that in life that you can't be something unless you do the work to fulfill that characteristic.
Yeah, I get that completely. And kind of going back to some of the first things you said there, I think it's really important to recognize who and what you should emulate. And it doesn't mean that you have to imitate that, but you emulate success. That's kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Second is, I have to be able to tell those in my life the truth. Because, when they're not doing the right thing, they know they're not doing the right thing. And if you tell them that everything is great, they know you're lying. So then when you turn around and compliment them, they perceive that you're lying, that you're just blowing smoke.
Yeah.
But I think there's a way to go about that. If I have a kid who's being a little devil child, I don't have to call him the devil child. But I can point out that the behavior that he's exhibiting is that of a devil child.
And maybe not of who he's saying he wants to be.
Stay away from who he is, because
Yes.
at any moment we can go from the most endearing person to the most obnoxious. Any one of us can.
Yeah, and if you say you don't, I don't know. They say the worst flaw is the one who says they have none.
Yeah. Well, and you want, especially young people, to not attach who they are to a behavior in the moment, because invariably it's failure, at least a failure, and then it just kind of builds on itself. And that's where some of the self-talk comes into play.
Yes.
I failed, but I'm not a failure.
Yes.
I was mean today, but I'm not a mean person. If I am a mean person, what reason would I have to ever apologize? And then I never grow, and I never fix, and I never
You're right.
improve. The 3 W's, go back and remind me of those again.
Of who am I? So
Yeah.
listing anything quality like hard worker, I'm loyal, I'm
Yeah.
trustworthy, and then what you do. And I think you're making a good point there, and I'll get to what I was thinking in
Yeah.
a sec after you finish your thought. And then how am I? Basically, a W in how, right? But
Yeah.
you will be affected how you feel. Like, so you said if they know they're not doing something that
Yeah.
they said is who they are, you're doing them no favor by not telling them the truth, but you don't necessarily need to be hard on them.
Right.
And I will say, Coach, that we live in a society that we give labels, and that is a distortion to go absolute and go, well, you lied to my friend, you're a liar. That was
Right.
just one sample of who that person was.
Right.
But we are all evolving and correcting ourselves, and that self-talk's super important.
Yeah. That who part might be the thing that society has thrown so many different options out there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But that's probably the thing that young people are most trying to figure out for themselves.
Yeah.
And I do believe they need some mature, wise guidance in that regard.
That's why you're on the show. That's why you're here.
Well,
That's why we're doing it.
After all these years, I think I have more questions than I have answers. It's like,
That's how we learn sometimes.
yeah, and I think when you're younger, you just don't know what you don't know. When you get a little bit older, you start to recognize that there's a lot of things that you don't know. And I think some people, as they get older, they get a little bit more stuck in their ways, in their perspectives and so forth, or they go the other way, and I'm going the other way, like, I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, you want to continue to learn. But with, you know, going back to the young people, they're in a process of figuring that out, and they need to recognize that who they are goes well outside of what they do for a career, or on our level, it's what they're doing with their sport, or you know, their performances or what have you.
A lot of boxes in high school too. I remember being the
Yeah.
culture was very like, well, where am I? Where do I fit?
Yeah.
And then the effects of identity loss was one of my major focuses in my as I became an LCSW, went to USC, was just either way of an increase in identity or a decrease in identity, athletes are in trouble.
Yeah.
And they replace those pillars with different things,
Yeah.
and we get ourselves in trouble. So it's not just that one thing. Like you said, you're filling the time, not
Yeah.
coaching. It seems like you have other passions and other things.
Yeah, I do, but I guess I'm also seasoned enough now to know that I'll find other things.
Yeah, but the youth.
Yeah, the youth and even myself, when I was more youthful, you know, your identity naturally gets tied up into what you do.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'll experience now in the next couple of months what it feels like to not be a worker or an employed person, and I'm not like overly thrilled with that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what the possibilities are, but I recognize that there will be an identity shift there also. And so I've taken my time getting out of things that are all part of my identity. Believe it or not, having my yard maintenance business was part of my identity. I was that hard worker. I was that grinder, you know.
Yeah.
I was that person that was willing to climb underneath bushes to get leaves that you couldn't get a rake into, and that was part of my identity. My mother always used to say, "You're a hard worker," and that became part of my identity. Now, I think that's good,
Yeah.
but what happens when you're no longer a hard worker? Now you have to be able to deal with that mental trauma. Think about on the high school level, you experienced the football thing. You know what that last part of football was like.
Yeah.
Think about like drill team kids who are, by virtue of the event or the activity, are supposed to all be the same.
Right.
It's synchronized dance, right?
And no room for mistakes. Right?
No room for mistakes. Makeup, hair, outfits, all supposed to be pretty similar. And then when their final season of drill team is done, well, where do they go?
That's a good point.
There's a lot of
We hope they can translate.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that when it comes to identity.
Coach, I was gonna say, it made me think of something real quick. When I played for you over at Bingham, my identity was I bought into some concepts. You know, I'm gonna hustle to the ball.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna rip your head off.
Yeah.
And I think that when there was that like play, and I got clipped and we declined it. It could have been like a fourth, and I want to say 13. We got field position 0-0, 3rd and 28. They ran a draw play. There was like 8 missed tackles. They didn't run my direction, and I assumed he was going to get tackled, and then I took a bad angle, and it felt like that brought a label, you know, like, hey, I choked. I didn't think that play would be the is all say all, but that was a very like uncharacteristic thing of me.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time with that, and I felt like I had to like do a lot of things. Now I will say, I remember falling to my knees after, and I don't know if you remember that, but you said something to me, and I'm not mad at you.
Yeah.
But it took me later in my life to realize that even though, yeah, maybe I didn't want to hear that at that moment, it helped me because what you told me is what life is. You know, I think when I felt with my emotions, I fell down, I collapsed. You were like, oh, you know what? Get up and go shake their hand. And it may have been the end of my world in that moment, but I've fallen a lot in life, Coach.
Yeah.
And I had to get up. And if I was just sitting there and somebody's like, yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? Like, hey,
Yeah.
you know, and not saying you didn't want to maybe give me a hug or whatever,
Yeah.
but you were saying, Julian, get up and do what you got to do. And I've had to learn how to get up in my life. I've fallen a lot. And that was something that took time to appreciate that.
Yeah.
But that stuck out to me.
Well, I got to be honest, I don't remember that specifically.
It's okay. It's all right.
But I can hear that. I can hear that coming out of me.
Yeah.
I probably told you about the girls basketball player that she got knocked down, and I knew she was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I did basically the same thing. Are you all right? Yeah, I'm all right. Then get up.
Yeah.
And those are you mentioned earlier, maybe last week or maybe in our emails about nuggets. Those are nuggets that almost become mantras in our minds if they get applied in the right situation at the right time. And I can tell you, I'm sure at that time, I wasn't thinking, well, I'm going to affect Julian's life for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a natural kind of thing to do because I think that's the appropriate thing to do.
You got to trust yourself and do it.
Yeah.
You know,
and
in the moment.
The appropriate way to behave in that moment is to keep your chin up and fake it till you make it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then that thing, hopefully that kind of catches on in your mind and you remembered it. Obviously you have remembered it.
Yeah.
I have all kinds of mantras in my mind. And it's like, one is, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Well, if that's my first thought and it catches on quickly,
Right.
that's kind of a repetition kind of thing. It catches on quickly. I don't get a chance to get into that poor, pitiful me, that pity party thing that's counterproductive anyway.
Well, yeah.
Because it already kicks in like, hey, get up.
You're catching on to something too with where the science is actually a game of offense and defense with our thoughts.
Yeah.
The brain only communicates with us through putting images in our minds, words in our minds, and you actually fight fire with fire. You have to put the right images back, the right words back. And there is a scientific formula to, reduce the initial depression, anxiety, frustration, and bring it down and kind of just make it more manageable. But a lot of those components you're saying are part of that. And I feel that that's not in schools, there's not in even places like a police force, places where they're making critical decisions all the time.
Yeah.
And I just don't know why, as a society, if we have the science, why we're not making that available. But these are good tips, right? But in an organized effort, I haven't really seen that. Now, Coach, thought for you.
Yeah.
There was another time when, just since we're talking about like kind of this role and stuff, where you would kind of bring up running the ball.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, looking back, I was like, hey, I am just happy I'm, coming off of being an MVP in defense. I'm comfortable here. And that very well seemed like something in the unknown. And I didn't want to do poorly. But you had thrown it out there to me. But you did let me make my choice. But when you had kind of told me maybe like more of an uncle in my area, I'm like, I wanted the big brother though. I wanted.
Yeah.
But it's like you go through life. But I had my own agency. There's things I knew, didn't know. But it's just like those little moments where there were some conversations, and I look back and I go, hey, I maybe would have liked. No, listen. You may regret this, or you might want to reevaluate that. But you do the best you can.
Yeah. So explain to me. I'm not catching the
I think it was
question
like
in this.
football. Like there was a time you alluded to the fact in high school football for me to play a little bit on offense.
Yeah. Okay.
And even in college, they wanted me to play fullback a little bit.
Okay.
But it seemed like something that like I heard you, but
Yeah.
maybe you weren't as stern with me to do it. And so I had my own fears. I didn't want to like do poorly or lose my spot. And I guess that was a time where it's like, looking back, I'm like, I would have liked you to be a little more stern and shake me by the shoulders and say, no, Julian, we're gonna run the ball. And that's what you're gonna do. But I guess it's that fine line of like, how much can you really direct versus.
Yeah, I got you completely. I don't know that I have ever forced someone to do anything.
Yeah.
other than maybe some instantaneous situations. For instance, I would force my grandson to stop before he runs out into the road.
Right.
You know, things like that.
Right.
But ultimately, we all know that we're more motivated and we're going to be more effective. We're going to be happier, you know, when we make our own decisions and our own paths.
Intrinsic, yeah, motivation.
There's certainly some guidance that should happen.
Yeah.
But in the end, there are final decisions. And, you know, that's a free agency concept, but it applies, I think it applies across the board. And so I don't remember our conversations specifically,
okay.
but I'm sure it would have been, hey, this is what I think, this might be good for you. How about give it a try?
We had Will Naylor playing it, and my
Yeah.
mentality was like, well, Will plays it. And I remember you
Yeah.
saying something like, so?
Yeah.
Like, then go and take the position. And I was
Yeah.
more like, yeah, but, and I think you said something like, well, I hate when players do that. Why is that person's position? It's a new season, you've been
yeah.
training.
Yeah.
Go out there and see what you can do. And I guess what I'm uncovering here with you is there's this gap here of people are unaware, but your experience makes you aware.
Yeah.
And then you want to kind of pivot and influence, but
Yeah.
people have their agency.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a hard little gap here. You know, me as a therapist,
Yeah.
I feel it a lot.
Yeah, I can see what
Yeah.
you're saying. I'm sure in the role of therapy that, you know, your patients ultimately end up healing themselves with your guidance.
Right.
And I'm sure that, you know, they have to make some conscious choices to take various therapeutic routes, whatever those might be.
Yeah. Usually exposure to things they haven't done before.
Yeah.
And really like, it's a game of wins and losses. Wins does get them to change.
Yeah.
But usually they don't want to try again because the mind's pretty convinced it'll be the same way.
Right.
You do have to like put yourself out there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think that brings us to a question that you have: what's the right amount of help?
What
Or
is the right amount? Yeah.
in this case, maybe what's the right amount of nudging or the right
Yes.
amount of encouragement, direction,
Yeah.
etc. But I do kind of think back again. Did I ever more or less tell a kid that, no, this is what you're going to do? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And
You know, we actually aren't supposed to tell people what to do either in
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
But again, back to that comparison. Oh, I hear that who you want to be is an all-state, or you want to be someone who plays college.
Yeah.
Well, those who have done it have done this.
Yes.
So I can be someone who reminds you, and you want me to be honest with you if I see it or not. You
Yeah.
know what? I haven't seen you really training after. I guess you got to do a little more. And that kind of like puts it back on them.
yeah,
And you're making them have their own choice,
yeah.
you know?
I think when that choice is available, everything you just said there kind of hits the right balance point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would guess that, you know, if the team first concept comes into play, that might be a whole nother ballgame where I might say, I realize this is what you want to do,
Yeah.
but I know better, and you would be better off here, or our team would be better off here. Even there, though, I think the words would finally come out, we need you to do
At
this.
some point, we got to give our opinion too, you know?
Yeah, we need you to do this, but at the same time, you're going to ultimately have to make your choices. I appreciate that with the way I was raised as a child, and I think that
Yeah.
we raised our children in that way. When we're talking about using a therapy of some sort or
Yeah.
some sort of communications to help people towards careers and so forth, there's always uncertainties. You know, I don't know that we would ever know that you might have more success if you went to the offensive side of the ball than the defense. We don't necessarily
true.
know that.
It's true. It doesn't hurt to try, though.
No, it doesn't hurt
You
to
know?
try. And I think, you know, I think the biggest thing that we want to get past in that regard is being willing to risk failure.
Yes.
And that is a hard thing. I see that
The
more.
hardest.
I believe I see that more now than I did, you know, even 30 years ago when I
There's an
started.
out-of-proportion fear of the world.
Yeah, the fear of the world, that fear of failure, that fear of someone's going to see me failing.
Especially
you know.
nowadays. We woke up, we were in the paper,
Yeah,
and people are like, have the paper, hey, we saw this. Nowadays, I think if we had social media back then, how we were in the locker rooms and stuff, it's a totally different world, Coach.
Yeah, it is, and so now, you know, you got me thinking,
Yeah.
what types of principles, if I was still going to be teaching health,
Yeah.
what type of principles relative to that being how to take good advice, how to really scrutinize that advice, and then ultimately take responsibility for your own decision. I think that's the way I would teach it. But I might go into more details now, how to avoid the social media influence. You guys would have had the influence of mainly just your peers.
Well, we did get in some fights on TV, and we had
Yeah,
some
that
things
did
that back
happen.
in the day that were like, you know, people call my house, other players, hey, I heard you said this in the paper, and that was fun.
Yeah.
But I'd only imagine in today's stuff. But you know, Coach, rewinding it a little bit, you
Yeah.
said something that like even in today's time in your life, you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
You're still learning. But I think that this is part of the stigma that maybe comes with help, you know. So I help some pro athletes right now.
Yeah.
Antonio Arroyo, he won his title fight of the world, and then he got disqualified just on Saturday. They said it was a headbutt. Met him on an airplane, just kind of trained him. I've got some people like that once you start to dive in, you realize the type of things that come with thinking mental health or, you know, therapy. And I've helped everything from police officers locally where there's just like an idea of like, I should have this. I know what I'm doing, or athletes going, I'm good. But really, therapy's hard because it's like you're gonna have somebody be honest about what you're showing them and check in. I mean, how many people do that besides with the mirror in themselves? You can lie to yourself a lot. It's not for it is for everybody, but it's not everybody who sees the value in that. You know?
Yeah, it's an undertapped resource, in my opinion, especially for athletes. I can't even imagine what it was like in the NFL in the early days, where, well, it would have been similar to, you know, World War II. Soldiers coming back with PTSD, and we had no idea that even was.
Right.
The early days of the NFL, and then in sports in general, with the masculinity thing, the, you know, the toughness thing, and all that. And by the way, just to be fair, I would never again compare war to football.
Yeah.
I mean, I can use that word, but
Yeah.
it isn't anywhere near the same thing.
It's not.
And
It's not.
the trauma that one might experience by maybe not hustling on that one play, we can't correlate that.
When it comes to people's lives and responsibility, you know.
Yeah.
It's something else. Yeah. But I think with young minds, maybe that was our mentality of like, but it was a lack of understanding.
But as coaches, we use those things, you know.
Yeah.
It was a motivational tool,
Right.
to get you to a place where you were ready to go, so to speak. But I always thought that I would almost cringe when I would even say it myself.
Yeah.
And I'll even say it now, the war that football was something that we had to prepare you for. But that wasn't near the preparation that military personnel have to prepare for actual war.
You were talking about mental health too, and just like how you can imagine NFL in that time period
Yeah.
getting help. You know what they were calling people in the military who would see people like myself? They called us wizards because
Right.
you spoke with us and then you disappeared.
Yeah.
Because the minute they found out you had a problem, poof. And I think sometimes athletes have gone, well, I'll pay you cash because I don't want the stigma if they do I don't want to have that diagnosis,
Yeah.
you know, that something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
We get so into that, like, well, we need coverage or we need to know what it is. But really, a diagnosis means that it's not normal that you even lift that much or that dedicated to hard work or that successful.
Yeah.
Diagnosis kind of have this, like, stigma that it's like, oh, I don't want that one.
Yeah.
Steph Curry's a diagnosis. How's he making so many three-pointers? You know what I mean? It's just not normal to, but it's good ways and not so good things. So there's these things called powers and talents, which you're saying you have powers and talents that you can use in different things. We talked about identity, powers and talents. It's like, what do they do now? But there is a system and just to make sure we're right, back home, there is a system to increase the record and maxes of your powers, to make them stronger, and to strengthen the weaknesses that come with those powers. And every person has powers, and there's always weaknesses usually attached to those powers. And so when you do mental health and you look at your timeline of events, we can go, oh, an event like that, or this quality you have, like if I were to read you, I'm not going to do it, like that. But for you to be hardworking, have that moral compass, coach, just who you are. Maybe me and you didn't have the most like verbal conversations on an emotional level, but because of who you are, I knew you'd be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like we're calling each other all the time because of
Yeah.
what you showed me. You're the type of guy that if there's respect and consistency, you want to help. And
Sure.
I know that about you.
Sure.
So that's why, I banked on you being here, and you are here,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate you saying those things. So the whole wizard thing, I'd never heard of that, but I can hear that coming out of the Neanderthal mouths of, those early days, right?
Right.
And the chiropractor was considered in that same way a quack. And now you don't have a professional team of any type that doesn't employ at least a part-time chiropractor because of the specificity of it, all with the objective of fixing a problem when one comes up. But I think more valuable is the preventative part of it. And if you're preventing injuries, you can train harder, and if you can train harder, you can perform better. That to me is a no-brainer thing. Yeah. Having not had a lot of experience with therapy and so forth, I do understand a lot of the sports psychology concepts, more on a surface level than probably some of the things that you have dealt with. But I've been around athletes that have, let's call them, what is it when you're a hitting slump, or even with runners, they can't figure out why all of a sudden they're not running as well as they used to. And then they start to worry about it, and then they start to tense up. And all of these things work counteractive to performance. There's no question about that. One of my simple mantras when it comes to coaching and coaching kids and preparing for performance is you got to be bold. We all know you can't play any of these sports if you got something holding you back. And that something could be just about anything. When you start talking, you're talking about mainly professional athletes. If I bring it down to the high school athlete, there isn't a high school athlete that's not carrying around some immediate baggage. Something just barely happened before that ball game.
And you're saying on a performance level, a lot of what I focus on is when you have, it's something that we're not really talking about in our society, but the truth is, when you play high school football, you're the man. You play college football, you're the man. You're getting introduced to all these people, the parties, girls, there's drugs, there's a whole culture of like this like demeanor of like, no, but I'm hard on the field, and I want to be hard off the field.
Yeah.
And I find guys who don't get caught up in that. And not to mention, we are a business.
Yeah.
So a lot of these athletes, they might play the game well, but they're like, hey, am I free though? Am I free to be myself? Do I have my own style? And when you start getting comments in today's media, people criticizing the game, people talking trash, it gets to them. But then let alone what happens if they have a relationship problem, stuff at home, things on the field, like at least for me, on an intensity-wise, there were some things off the field that weren't going right in my life, but football was like an outlet to be like, I don't get in trouble for delivering this to you, and I get applause.
Right.
This works, but then you know what happened when it was removed from my life?
Yeah.
I kind of had a temper.
Yeah.
I started to realize I don't have this outlet to just play football, and I had to really do some work to kind of bring it down, But the identity usually has a correlation with filling that pillar with other things. But what pillars have you found, Coach, that makes players maybe the most successful, or people the most successful? Like themes, like qualities, like to really be the guys from. I know you don't remember everything with all your players, but the ones that go and do bigger things, let it be in the sport or not, maybe both. Like, one or the other? What type of things do you feel like you see? And it can even be into that segue of like your role models or people you felt like have just had things you're like, that's what it's about right there.
Yeah. Some words that come to mind is you got to show up. And I mean that figuratively and literally. Literally, show up to practice. Figuratively, be ready for practice and give it all. Like even maybe you were giving it your all as a diversion from other things going on in your life. At least you're giving it your all, and you have a chance to be successful there.
That's true.
People who, so they show up. People who are productive, and that means do something. How can you feel good about what you're doing when you're not doing anything?
Yeah.
You know, people who prepare well. In coming over here, I was a little bit concerned because I'm thinking I'm not overly prepared right now. I mean, the comfortable thing for me to do would be to look down here, and I haven't looked down once.
No, you haven't. This has been a real conversation like I wanted, you know.
You know, when I used to do game plans, I'd have the whole script in my hand, and I never looked at it. But the process of preparing that script was the preparation. And then be ready to perform and present. And when you do those things as an athlete, when you do those
Showing
things,
up and being prepared.
be prepared, you know, be bold, all that. You've now put all of your identity into something that you can actually control.
Yes.
You can control those things. You may not ever be able to control the outcome.
That's right.
But you can control all those other things. And I really appreciate my dad, who was a real outstanding athlete here in these parts back in those days.
Is that right?
I may have told you some about it. You know, he never, you know, some of my friends, their parents were a little overbearing at times, right? Although it's a whole different parent world now than it was then. Parents were more inclined to stay away, but there were some that were really involved. And my dad was involved. He was at all the games, you know, and he coached us when we were younger and stuff, but he'd always just say, give him heck. And that was it. Give him heck. And we knew as his sons at that time, the only thing that was really important to him is that we gave it the best we had.
Yeah.
Now my mom says that he used to just be so nervous and uptight, he just would never let us know, even for our games. But I'm kind of digressing there. But what was the last question that you asked me?
No, because I was thinking while I was going with that too, because when we're talking about just like nowadays, right, and the type of qualities that people have that we're just like, and then we just started talking about showing up, and just being accountable, and you were just, you know, your dad was showing up for you, and he had some of his philosophies. But these type of things is what's important, and it made me think when you were talking though, Coach, we were just talking about people get nervous of failure.
Yeah.
But then we do want to have preparation. But what I have found is you have to kind of be willing to prepare, make a sound decision, but then don't keep 2 feet in different areas.
Right,
you know?
right.
Both feet in, and you got to learn as you go.
Yes.
Like the adjustments that we make as we go is part of the evolution. We stay in the fire.
Right.
But life, unfortunately, doesn't work where it's like, I'm only going to put myself out there if I know I'll start for that guy.
Right.
Or I know that this will happen for me.
Right.
There's just no guarantees like that.
Yeah, that is where the risk failure comes into play.
Yes.
You know, scientists come up with thesis or hypothesis, or not thesis, but theory and hypothesis, and you know, they know they're likely going to fail as they get closer to success. But success is certainly not guaranteed. You were just saying something that I just lost track of again. So repeat that last part again.
I was saying, you know, like nowadays in age though, tell me this, like for these athletes to be successful, to make it to the next level, these qualities that we're noticing about showing up, doing the work, it almost seems like nowadays if they make more of noise like on social media, as they have like more hype to them, that seems to be where people gravitate. But we're in a day and era where like influencers or whatnot are not always people who are credible. They're not, and I'm not saying that there's athletes that are getting more hype and they're not the best athlete necessarily, but it does seem like Like, what did it take to make it back then? Is it the same to make it now?
Yeah, there's the glass house concept. You build on things that are going to collapse. They're going to eventually collapse. You build on a solid foundation. That's the better way to go. It's not going to guarantee ultimate success.
Yeah.
How you define success is a whole nother topic here.
Right.
But I think the net of that is that principles that we've been applying forever are still the same principles. We just you use the word noise. We got just a whole lot of noise still around us. So when you're speaking to mental health as it relates to success, shut off the noise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think there's more excuses today than there was back then too. Like it almost seems like we allow well, that's a good story. That makes sense. Let's not really question it. But I think I'm not seeing excuses exist there either.
Yeah.
The Sundays, NFL Sundays, how many guys wear a jersey and say they would have played if they had this injury or not? But few people have actually been there. They put themselves out there. But I feel like we're in a society of more excuses.
Yeah. A thought that just comes to my mind in that regard is, as a coach, I had to emphasize the objective of win games. That's how we were measured by the outside world.
Yes.
Okay, but that I don't think that was ever how we actually measured ourselves. And if that was how we measured ourselves, and we mentioned 7 state championships in 36 seasons, well, I must have failed 29 times then.
Yeah, we hadn't won one since the 30s when I played, right?
Yeah.
So it was, but you know, just on that thought, I was so fixated on gotta win state.
Yeah.
But we did something that, when I looked into it, that we have the best defense in all classifications since, like, I think when I really looked at it, it'd be like the 20s when it was like a different type of football going on.
Right.
But like, how many teams win state championships and we don't remember? But at least in the community, we had that defense, and that was how we were. And the game has changed since then, where like offenses is more spread.
Sure.
We're not running the ball the same. But just what you're saying, when we measure just wins and losses, there are so many more wins in life that aren't just about the final end outcome. I'm all for like making wishes, doing the work to make them come true. But the journey and the growth and the jewels of treasures and talents of life, I learned so much that if I were just to go off of, did I win the title that I wanted? Man, I would feel like a loser, you know? And I think at a young age I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's so funny because your class was really that way. Your class of guys.
Maybe that's how we had to be. I don't know, but that's how me at that age.
Yeah.
That's how I did it. Right, being captain, making them run.
Yeah.
We had a different level of standard.
Yeah.
But we also, there were some things looking back I probably wouldn't do again. I'll be honest with you. I probably wouldn't have allowed us to get benched and build the team. I would have been a little more selfish. I probably would have done some things differently. But we did develop the program.
Yeah.
And we did the best we knew at that time.
Yeah.
And no regrets with it, you know.
That's
how we were a little bit, huh?
That was a special group of players, and so then it made it a lot of fun. In looking back, my hope is that you guys had some fun and some enjoyment with it.
Right.
Peace is important. You know, walking off the field with pride, or whatever words we want to use.
Right.
What word? Satisfaction is still not quite. There's not really a word that I think you can pin on. We've just lost a game.
Yeah.
But we feel good about what we've contributed in spite of some of the things we didn't contribute, or in spite of some of the mistakes and things that we made. But that's where resiliency comes into play. And probably the thing that I'm most concerned about with young people today is that there isn't a lot of resiliency. We have that word that's floating out there, but I don't know if there's a whole lot of specific training. resiliency almost means we have to let you fail. We have to let you not be happy all the time.
Right.
We have to, resiliency by definition is bouncing back.
But it seems like people are getting in the way of allowing failure.
Yes.
We're trying to kind of like, everybody gets a trophy, but like let's push
Yeah.
everybody through, and that is harmful.
I don't think it's good, because I just don't think it's real. And we've talked about getting back to what is real. Not everyone is going to be the All-Stater, the college athlete, the All-American. That's just not real.
Right.
And so how do we measure ourselves, and how do we stay mentally healthy through the whole process, let alone all the things that come in adult life.
Right.
That's a whole other thing you were talking about.
Right.
Some of these people that you've worked with, they all have their families and they all have their struggles. They still got to come to the work, which is their sport or what have you, and they got to do their job. So, I mean, these are consistent human experiences, and that kind of full circle back to the mental health stuff.
Yes.
Whether it be for athletes or for the general populace, why not access resources and help? And why not break down the stigma that somehow you're weaker, or
Right.
or you don't have it all together?
Right. Well, check this out, Coach. Per a theory of Maslow's hierarchy
Yeah.
of needs, he said less than 1% of the population makes money or a living doing what they feel their talents were intended to do.
Yeah.
So most people are providing for themselves, not like going, yep, and this is like my favorite talent. What I've found in looking back,
Yeah.
if you stay in the heat and you're evolving and you're putting in hard work, you show up, you will eventually get there. But I think in our mentality, we compare ourselves to people who are there, and then we're like,
Yeah.
well, in this generation, it's like, well, if I'm going to do it, I need to know that it'll like, I could be this guy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you don't know. You got to get lucky a little bit, have some good fortune, but you have to be willing to dedicate to the process.
Yeah.
And when we live in a very like fast, or things just happen fast for people, people get discouraged. And where I would counter with what you're saying to emphasize it, when 99% of people get stuck doing something that they don't love, yeah, I would think use your resources so you could do what you love, because most people don't have the luxury to stay in it
Right.
and evolve their talent and keep excelling, getting better. In high school, there was another memory that just came into me. I think graduation, you're like, Julian, let me see the GPA that I showed you. You're like, all right. But when I didn't couldn't accept when like Weber or SUU
Yeah.
put things on the table, and it's like I didn't have the tie to the party, I didn't have the grades. And my mentality and my ignorance was, well, Dixie State's the best JUCO in the country, so I don't need to get good grades. I can go run with my girlfriend and do this. I'll just
Yeah.
play there.
Yeah.
But what a Shark Tank that was, and I did play there. But the thing is to think that I'd be Dean's List twice, go to a top 10 school,
Yeah.
get the 4.0, but I had to evolve as a person, and it was just this. It was staying in it,
Yeah.
growing, and I just think that people don't do it enough. You
Yeah.
will. We evolve. That's how the mind works. We evolve. As we do things, it becomes like the resume of the mind.
Yeah.
We're like, I can do that because I've done this. Coach, I look at you and I think there's a lot of things you could do with what you've done. I have all the faith in the world with you. And if there's something new,
Yeah.
you'll adapt like
Yeah.
we did today, and in your retirement, the new phases of your life. But we need that nudge of what we should be doing in our communities on a bigger level. And I don't think it needs to be forcing anybody to do anything, but we need that nudge, and we need it more than ever, I think, these days.
Yeah. We do need the nudge. And when I say we, I'm talking about all generations. We always want to point downward to the...
Yeah, I think all generations, the American people, I think we need a nudge to make America more successful.
Yeah, I'm not really into the political game that much. I've been too busy to worry too much about all those kind of things. But I don't even think this is what you just mentioned, I don't even think it's a political thing. I don't think it
I
has
think
to
more
be.
of just like us people, of like how we treat each other, the values we instill in our community.
Yeah.
I think regardless of who a president is, or
Yeah.
we should still have who we are,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't dictate on like who a president is. That
Yeah.
without even going in the political, just more of like American people, like all of us,
Yeah.
and even the world, really, like
Yeah.
who the human race, who do we stand? Who are we? What are we gonna
Yeah.
do? You know.
Yeah, it needs to be a bottom-up thing.
The bar just seems like it's kind of getting lower.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think the bar needs to be a little higher. And what's wrong with a high bar?
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know where we lost that.
Yeah, I don't either. Bottom up is the way you see a lot of growth, and you guys in that 2004 season specifically were a bottom up type of team, and that's why I say it was a lot of fun to coach that particular team.
There are some things you remember then about it.
Oh, yeah.
Just use it.
No, I really do though, and and you've reminded me of a lot of things now.
What comes to mind, Coach?
Just some of the conversations that you and I had. Similar conversations to Chris Lydiard. Very similar type of conversations. And you and Chris were the same age, right?
Me and Chris were the same age, and I'm not going to get emotional with it.
Yeah.
But me and Chris were like brothers.
Yeah.
But life happens, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And but we had a lot of care for what we were doing
Yeah.
at that time. Yes, me and him were captains.
And Ryan, both
Roberts,
and
then Naylor.
Naylor, and the other middle linebacker, Moore.
Yeah. Ryan.
DeJulio.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of thinking some of the guys.
Cuff was a little younger, both Cuffs.
Yeah.
But you know, like we were pretty stacked on D. But you had like Penny too as a soft, you know.
Yeah.
But we
Bryce
weren't.
Benyon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do remember that being Bryce was your age too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Played corner on my side, strong side.
I just remember those were fun days at practice, and that goes. I mean,
We didn't even condition, Coach, because we just went all out.
Yeah, and the point there being is that we had pieces in place to do a lot of really good things, which we did, and then ultimately it didn't end in a state title that's only went to one. I guess we were 5A at that time.
Yeah.
Went to one 5A team.
Yeah, we lost 7-0.
Yeah.
And they ended up winning it.
But I feel like, look what you've done now. You've taken some of the lessons learned, some of the struggles. You're trying to make it into a real positive thing. Use your experience. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of other guys from that group that have had some good success. Unfortunately, we lost Stetson.
I know.
And I don't know that I can't recall anybody else that we've lost from that group. But
yeah.
That's one of the fun things about coaching is to see kids grow up and become men and do their own thing, and you just hope that we have. When I say we, I'm talking about the community have contributed enough that everybody can have their level of success, knowing though that there's going to be ups and downs for everyone.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this: as you get older, you just bring more people into your circle, and so there's more chance for bad things to happen. And now I'm starting to digress and just kind of BS in here because I know that we've already had our fight.
No, and it's okay. It's okay. And sitting here, I guess like it is kind of a trip, Coach.
Yeah.
Life is a trip. Just you and me chopping it up today. And I was just thinking, 20 years, how that goes by. I mean, what is it like for you just being here today and thinking back on 20 years ago? And I guess now I'm more of a man.
Yeah.
Today I have a family. I'm doing my things. What's this like for you? You're going to retire? What's the stage of your life like? Just this little snapshot,
This will be a funny analogy, but
yeah, let's go.
I think it's got to be a little bit like women who have babies. Imagine that.
Okay.
You carry that baby for all those months, and then you have to go through the delivery
right.
and the trauma and everything. And we all know stories of women who have said during labor, I'm never ever doing this again. And
Yeah.
you know, they're telling their husbands they hate them and you know, all that.
Yeah.
And then one way or another, they end up having more babies, and some of them lots.
Yeah.
My mother had 7. You think, how is that happening? And somehow or another, the negatives get blocked and the positives come out for them. And that's why they're willing to do it again.
That's right.
And I'd say that's kind of where I'm at, is all the positives just surface. And the negatives, yeah. But having said that, I was very fortunate. And I've mentioned that state titles, they're not the ultimate objective. The ultimate there's ultimate objectives. There's multiple things that come from all of this. But have had the experiences that I have had, I would call them tender mercies. And so having an opportunity to sit here and talk with you about this is pretty cool, you know. And you know, it's not going to be something that I'll forget just instantly. This will be something that'll stick in my mind, and then I'll pay attention to what you do and where all this goes, and it adds to the tapestry that is your life.
But you know, Coach, all in all, I think today, you know, I mentioned some things like the 3 W's.
Yeah.
Who am I? What am I? How am I? We talked about fear. We talked about the right balance of the nudge, never really like telling people what to do.
Yeah.
The bar just needed to be raised a little bit. It was cool to kind of just have this last lap of the tender mercies and just helping me get your perspective really of just like, hey, it's not all about the wins, and it's the evolution. We kind of had that last kind of pointed direction of the qualities that get people to go and be successful in football and in life. And you know, I had given that example, and I think a good thing for maybe us to end on is when it comes to running the ball, maybe the game changing.
Oh, yeah.
And just like to move forward in life through ups and downs, the adversity. Like literally, I think in a way the game has changed a bit. There's not much of the power offense, you know. But I kind of think in comparison, the game's changed a little bit for what it's going to take to like kind of run the ball in that metaphor in life, you know. And I think with those qualities, that's kind of what we're saying is showing up, staying with it, and any thoughts with that?
Yeah. So the majority of the run game that I started with was the same run game that I participated in.
Okay.
And it was, you had a point of attack, you had to trust the scheme, and if the scheme broke down, you stayed at that point of attack and you pushed the pile. You know, that was the whole idea. And if you're going at full speed, naturally you're going to have some physics in your advantage, mass and velocity, right? And you're going to break tackles or what have you, but you're going to push the pile.
Right.
3 yards in a cloud of dust times 3 is only 9, so you still had to come up with something better.
But that was in a way your philosophy of like, our guys, push comes to shove, even if you know where we're going, way we trained, we're going to move and make it work. Like it was kind of like, you can know what I'm doing, but we know what we're doing, and good luck stopping it.
There was an element of stubbornness, but at the same time grit. And I knew all these principles. I mean, I knew other ways to do it. But I thought that engaged the team the most.
Yeah.
Including offensive linemen who don't like to just step back and get swatted at by D-line guys. They want to be on the move. And then it also set up the hero plays for the quarterback receivers. Mm-hmm. So they were going to be kind of happy in the end too. Right. You know, there was method to the madness. It wasn't done just to be stubborn, but there was a little bit of that pride thing.
And Coach, you got criticized. Who doesn't get criticized? But you won your championships. And people who aren't out there putting themselves out there, they can always point the finger. People can criticize how the show goes. People can criticize. But there's those of us who are out there doing it. Yeah. It's easier to criticize when you're not in the arena, like we like to say. You know. So that was interesting. Well, so then the game evolved in the run game, and we
And we worked with it too, to these zone read kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then it went to RPOs, but zone read was just, you just read where the opening is at. And you have what's called duo. That was a whole nother concept. And we fiddled with those things after I brought Keith Chatelaine on, and you never would have known Keith, but Keith had played center in college and in the NFL.
Yeah.
And you know, he didn't really like that stuff as much. He still, as an offensive lineman, really enjoyed 46 blast or G counter, or we had a stretch play, but I would just say pitch it every time, which more or less limited where you could run the ball, you know, because you pitch rather than hand off.
Yeah.
And as an offensive lineman, we would get too far away from the things that kept his players on the assertive, that when we'd get too far away, he'd kind of, I could tell he was getting frustrated because he just wanted to rely on those basics, those fundamentals, and those old school way of doing things. So interesting, I went to the BYU coaches clinic last week, and now they have these outside zones, and they're predominantly a handoff, so you have more options. It doesn't force you outside. And it's the same principles. They say get the defense moving sideways. Your running back chooses a hole, a gap, so he's going to find space or grass space. But they figure that play after play after play, they still have the advantage if they can get the, you know, call linebackers moving laterally, and you got a running back coming at you vertically, north and south. That running back's going to have an advantage. So he's going to break tackles. So even if it's a bad read, as long as everyone's going horizontal, the offense gains an advantage.
But you know, me at linebacker, I'd be taking that angle. So I mean, even though
Yeah.
I'm ready to
Well, now what he's
Nobody
saying,
knows,
yeah.
so.
So he was saying, well, now what we'll teach on the other side is that these linebackers will just mirror you, right? Well, but you still have that opportunity to run outside. So if they're mirroring you too long, and you happen to be faster, you're going to win.
That's why we got to minimize that space. Can't
Yeah.
give you running backs that space. If you put those linemen back, minimize space, you run out of that option. Space is sitting there and waiting gets you in trouble. Well, Coach, with the running the game thing, what about now with life though? You think like the adjustments, some of the offenses changed for men to be successful.
Yeah.
Sports in life, we said showing up, being consistent, and it sounded like from our conversation the recipe is the same.
Yeah, I think they are.
It's just maybe more excuses and more ways to like look and point fingers other than looking at yourself.
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe if men raise the bar and create their own standards for how they want to be, who they are, what they do coinciding with that, I believe if they stick to something, they'll get there.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think society has changed so much that that men's roles, expectations, and ways to be successful have changed all that much. But there should be almost an evolutionary process where we become more compassionate, we become more understanding, we take on different roles.
The
all that kind of
plays
stuff.
for off the field, they're coming. And the Essentials album with these plays, really my care package of my collection, helping people with imagery and knowing what to do in situations, but really like a cell coach, it grows with you and it actually tailors to each person. I'm not sitting here trying to tell people what to do. Kind of like what you said, that read, finding the whole, people will be able to kind of take the curriculum, and it's really for everybody. But I know they'll be able to have better outcomes. Coach, I appreciate you coming out with us today. I got a little something for you, you know.
You do?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely get it in the size you want. But I think for today, Coach, you know what I mean? Just a little something. Because you learn how to speak that language, you know,
show it to
back
the
home.
camera.
Yeah, and the all yellow really for people who do an episode with us, Coach. So appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good size.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll get that going with you, and like it, subscribe, leave a comment. Love to message back with people back home. This is what you can expect from me, just consistency with this, showing up with this, and spreading that light. And just appreciate you one last time, Coach John Lamborn, and just to your segue in the future, may all the things that you want in your life come true, my friend.
Thank
with all
you.
your talents. We appreciate you.
Amen. Sounds good.
You too. All right.